What's up, everybody? It's me, Adam, here to talk about vinyl.
It starts with just a little glance now. Right away you're thinking about romance now.
So, before we dive back into my record collection, I wanted to take a minute to discuss how I organize my record collection. Now, usually, when you walk into your local record store, you're going to see all of the albums separated by genre categories. And that works really well for a retail setting, but for my personal collection, I really enjoy seeing a lot of different types of music all in the same place. So my top level of organization is alphabetizing by artist name. How my collection differs from a retail setting is that I alphabetize by the name as a unit. So for instance, I don't put the Alan Parsons Project with the P's, I put it in with the A's. My second level of organization is arranging each album within an artist's discography by the year it was released. So even though, for instance, Yes's Time in a Word would come after Close to the Edge and Fragile, I put it before because it was released before those albums. And what that does is allow me to follow a band's musical progression as they make more albums. And it's just a lot more fun to look at it that way. All that being said, there's no one right or wrong way to arrange your music collection. It's totally up to you. So let's look at some records. First up, I have Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys. This album is not only a fantastic album in and of itself, but a really important one in the progression of rock and pop music. When this album was being written, the Beach Boys were on tour in Japan, and Brian Wilson stayed home to write some songs. He was really inspired by how the Beatles were starting to transition and progress out of their pop music phase around the time that Rubber Soul came out. Brian was experimenting with symphonic additions to rock and pop music. Not only did he make a fantastic album that just happened to not be terribly popular at the time, he, in doing so, inspired the Beatles to progress even further into their experimental phase, which is where we start to see albums like Sgt. Pepper. Unfortunately, my copy is not an original copy, it's a reissue. But the great thing about that is it's a really pristine 180-gram pressing of this fantastic album. So it plays beautifully. And I mean, this is a must-have album for anybody who's getting into record collecting. Either find an old copy or drop 20 bucks on a new one because it's well worth listening to. Alright, another great album that I have is Billy Joel's The Stranger. I picked this up at a thrift shop in Marshall, Michigan, just because I had a couple of really good singles on it, specifically Moving Out, which is one of my favorite Billy Joel songs. But I gave it a couple of listens and found it to be an amazing album. There's a certain cohesion to not only the sounds of this album, but the themes that each of the songs are presenting. It's almost like a concept album about what it's like to be a Jersey boy in the late 70s. And it's just a really fun and listenable album. Definitely recommend this one. Alright, so what I have next is something a little bit newer. I have Coheed and Cambria's The Afterman Ascension. I've been a big fan of Coheed and Cambria ever since I first heard them a long time ago. They were that kind of almost punkish underground rock band with a very progressive influence. I stopped being really interested in their music around the time that they released Year of the Black Rainbow because they had sort of moved away from the progressive elements that got me really interested in their music. But the great thing about this album is it marks their return to that really punchy, progressive sound that got most people really interested in this band. So I'm really happy to have this album, to see them returning to a sound that is really fun for me to listen to. The complement to the Afterman Ascension, and that's the Afterman Dissension. This is their most recent album from this year, and again, it's a continuation of the sound that they returned to in 2012, being more progressive, being a lot punchier, being what got most of us who love Coheed and Cambria into Coheed and Cambria. Now the great thing about this copy is that it's this really beautiful blue marbleized vinyl. I am a sucker for colored vinyl. If I see it, I'm buying it. So not only is this a really beautiful album, it's also a really great one to listen to. I'm loving Coheed and Cambria's return to their old sound and interested in seeing where they continue to go musically in the future. Alright, that's all that I'm going to talk about this time.